I'm a private detective, and I keep 2 magnums in my desk. One's a gun, and I keep it loaded. The other's a bottle. It keeps me loaded. It's a tough job, but then I'm a tough guy. And anyway, it pays the bills. But I was particularly hard up for clams today when a tall blonde walked into my office. A real looker of a dame. I told her to tell me her life story and I'd provide the happy ending. Instead, she offered me a job. She asked me to track down some film noir recommendations to watch this November. I picked up the pieces from my broken heart and took the job. Here's what I found.
Yes, it's Noirvember, and to celebrate, I just want to recommend a few noir films that you might not have heard of. All of these are on physical media, but if you don't want to collect them on Blu-ray, I'm sure a lot of them are available on streaming, and there's also a lot of noir films, classic ones, that are on YouTube for free. So don't tell anybody I told you, but it just might be the truth. But welcome everybody to the Cobwebs channel. My name is Daniel, and I wanted to kick off with some Criterion titles because Barnes & Noble is actually doing a Criterion sale this month, 50% off. So if you're looking to pick up some Criterions, here's some good noir options. Let's kick things off with the Asphalt Jungle from 1950, directed by John Huston. Now, if you're familiar with any movie starring Sterling Hayden about him performing a big heist, it's probably The Killing, directed by Stanley Kubrick. And that's a great movie, but this one's really good too, and I definitely don't think it should be overlooked. It's about Sterling Hayden and a group of guys who are performing a big jewel heist. And it's really good about showcasing just the intensity, but also the professionalism that a heist like this would entail. But the heist actually happens about maybe halfway through the movie, and it's a great sequence. But then the rest of the movie is about, can they get away with this? Can the cops actually catch them? And the movie does a really good job of putting you into the shoes of these robbers and just feeling really scared for them and scared they're going to get caught. And the movie does a good job of portraying the police force as just this incredibly powerful, unstoppable force that's going to crash down on them in any moment. So the paranoia of the film is really, really great. I always love Sterling Hayden, so I love that the movie focuses on him. But there's a lot of great supporting performances around him, like Marilyn Monroe in her breakout role, actually. So I think the Asphalt Jungle is great. Like I said, if you like The Killing, don't pass up on this one for sure. Next up, we've got Kiss Me Deadly. This is late 50s, I think, 1955, so right there in the middle. It's starring Ralph Meeker, who I really like in these noir films. He's really good at just being like scummy and sleazy, but in like a strong, powerful way that's really good for a dark noir leading man. But it's starring him as Detective Mike Hammer, who was a big detective in fiction during this time, and there are several movies about this character. And this is such an interesting mystery movie with so much just weird eccentricities to it. There's so many strange characters. The movie's kind of confusing, but you're just fascinated being taken on the odyssey of this bizarre mystery that Ralph Meeker's going on. And he's just such an interesting and dark main character that's really fun to follow. As you can see there, he doesn't seem to be maybe the best guy in the world, and that's a really entertaining thing about him to watch. And the ending of this movie is so strange, an ending like you would almost never see in a noir film. So bizarre, I just love it, and it was probably kind of an influence on Pulp Fiction. Now, almost any noir film that you watch is going to be in black and white, but here is one in color, and it's called Leave Her to Heaven. And I imagine some people maybe could put this a little bit more into the melodrama category than the noir. It looks like a Douglas Sirk movie, even though it's not, just beautiful colors. But while it seems like a romantic melodrama in some ways, Gene Tierney as the main character just turns out to be such a sociopath that it's absolutely fascinating to watch, and it really turns into a dark, dark noir film. It's about Gene Tierney, and she meets Colonel Wilde's character, and they fall in love very quickly. They get married, and she really wants that just beautiful American dream with him, but she wants him all to herself, and she might just be willing to do whatever it takes to get him all to herself. It's directed by John Stahl. It's a gorgeous movie that's very dark and intense with just a great lead performance by Gene Tierney. It's cool getting to see her play a just really dark character like this. And the scene where she's on the boat watching in sunglasses, as the cover depicts, is an amazing noir sequence that for that scene alone, I think you got to see this movie. Now we've got probably the most famous movie in the stack, but just in case you haven't seen it, I do want to recommend Nightmare Alley, which is a very unusual noir, a carnival noir, if you can call that like a subgenre of the genre. But what it's about is you've got Tyrone Power's character. He works for this traveling carnival, and he gets trained on how to be a mentalist, how to perform a mentalist act. There's nothing supernatural going on here. It's very much just a carnival act, but he gets really good at it, and he gets so good at it, he gets to leave the carnival. He gets to move on to bigger and richer things, working for high society as a mentalist, and he takes it all the way. He's not claiming to be a performer and entertainer. He's claiming to be psychic, and he takes it really far in terms of even being a little bit of an evangelist, claiming that he's got this gift from God and that God gives him these visions, even though he's really just a con artist. And that's a fascinating story to watch. Tyrone Power is awesome in this because he's so good at just being very handsome and charming, but in a way that you just don't trust him. Very dark places this movie goes to. It was actually remade by Guillermo del Toro a couple years ago, and I absolutely love that remake, but this is a really good one too. And it's a very, oh, there we go. Well, it's a very cool Criterion release because it comes with these like tarot card kind of things for the movie. Okay, I had to pick those up, but yeah, just an awesome little addition to this Criterion release. So if you don't have it, it'd be a great thing to pick up in the sale for sure. Okay, let's move on to some Kino Lorber titles. This is Alias Nick Beal starring Ray Milland. You got Thomas Mitchell in this movie, and he is a local small-time politician, but he is gunning for bigger, better things, maybe even for being the governor. And he meets this guy named Nick Beal, Ray Milland's character, who promises that he can get him there. And Thomas Mitchell doesn't trust him, but the guy's methods are effective no matter how immoral they might be. And the movie hints by the end that this might have a seriously supernatural religious twist to it that kind of almost puts it into the horror genre. So it's a very unusual noir, but in a really cool way. I think it's pretty awesome. Then I Wake Up Screaming. This is one of my favorite noirs. I absolutely love this movie. I think it's so underrated. And it also has Betty Grable's, I think, only serious role. But it's a very early example of a noir, 1941, but it's very typical for the genre. It's a murder mystery. It really builds on flashbacks. This very beautiful woman who a lot of men were very interested in gets murdered. The cops are trying to figure out who did it. And the movie really tells you the story through Victor Mature's eyes and his relationship with that woman, whether or not he killed her, his relationship then with Betty Grable, and going on the run as the police start to suspect him more and more. It's a very typical noir, but incredibly well done, and has got a really awesome killer reveal at the end. So it's just a solid murder mystery. I Walk Alone. I absolutely love this movie. It's starring Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas, and Elizabeth Scott, three of my favorite actors to be in a noir film. Burt Lancaster is a guy who just got released from prison for bootlegging back during the Prohibition era. His partner, Kirk Douglas, didn't get caught. So Burt Lancaster then goes back up to meet with his partner. Kirk Douglas has now become a very successful, kind of shady, kind of criminal type businessman, but at least up and up on the outside. And Burt Lancaster, you know, he did time for him. So he wants a cut into his big business and his money-making opportunities. And Kirk Douglas doesn't want to give it to him. Burt Lancaster gives a really powerful, angry performance as this kind of bad guy who just got out of prison, but you still want to root for. And he has a kind of a really sweet romance with Elizabeth Scott's character that she's not exactly like a femme fatale. They have a legitimate romance that I think humanizes Burt Lancaster a lot more than he would have otherwise. I think otherwise he just would have come across as this scary brute, which he still kind of does, which is cool. Here we've got Pitfall. Man, this movie is so good. All about how an extramarital affair can go wrong. This is from 1948, starring Dick Powell. I'm a huge fan of Dick Powell. I think he's so good in noir films. But he's just this average middle-aged guy who starts to kind of go through a midlife crisis, very unsatisfied, even though he has a beautiful wife and kid and a house in the suburbs and a good job. He's got everything that people wanted during this time period. He's not happy and he's bored, and he meets Elizabeth Scott's character and starts an affair. And she's not really a femme fatale like you think. Like, she really is, like, seems like a good person. Just gets wrapped up into this socially unacceptable situation, much like he does. But there's another guy played by Raymond Burr in a really, really good role who really wants her and it will do anything it takes to get her. And that's where a lot of intensity comes in. And it's just a classic example of the American dream falling apart for an average guy, which is a classic staple of the noir genre. You got to have a movie like that in Noirvember. Here's a movie I absolutely love, man. Shakedown. Shakedown from 1950. With a cast of people I wasn't super familiar with, but it's starring this guy named Howard Duff. And he is a newspaper photographer who is incredibly ambitious. So it's kind of like Nightmare Alley in that it's about a really ambitious guy who's willing to do anything to get rich and famous. And he does do anything. So this is about the darkness of business and trying to get ahead and doing anything it takes. And he just does worse and worse things to get rich and famous. So it's very much a cautionary tale in that way. Kind of reminds me of Nightcrawler, that Jake Gyllenhaal movie that came out a few years ago. So if you liked that, I think you really got to see this. It's a tight 80-minute movie and you just can't go wrong. It moves so fast and it's really satisfying by the end. Here we have The Woman in the Window. I saw this recently for the first time and just loved it. The ending I have mixed feelings about, but otherwise I really love the movie. Starring Edward G. Robinson and Joan Bennett. Another kind of cautionary tale about the American dream falling apart if you step out of line. Edward G. Robinson is a successful businessman, has a great wife and kids. He's got a great life, but he's also bored. And he meets Joan Bennett and he really gets sucked in by her and he wants to have an affair. And somebody turns up dead and he has to cover up this murder. And the paranoia that this movie conveys in him not wanting to get caught, because actually a good friend of his is the district attorney and is investigating this murder. And he ends up like hearing a lot about the investigation and just sweating the whole way that he's not going to get caught for this murder. Man, it's just a phenomenal paranoia thriller. I love it. It's from 1944 and it's just such a great movie. And it's directed by Fritz Lang. I mean, Fritz Lang, awesome. You can't go wrong with Fritz Lang for Noirvember. Here's a few Warner Archive titles now. This is Dark Passage. Now, Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall made several movies together that Warner Archive has released, which is really great. Dark Passage, I think, is the most underrated, and it's one of my favorites. This is a really experimental movie. It's directed by Delmer Daves, right? Yes, Delmer Daves. It's a movie about a guy who was framed for murder, goes to prison, but escapes from prison and is on the run. This whole part of the movie is shot POV. This is a POV style movie, which is really unusual for the time. Yeah, I mean, this is 1947, so that's really experimental for this time period. And then he goes through plastic surgery and emerges looking like Humphrey Bogart. So the movie tells you he looked totally different before. So from that point on, it becomes a normally shot movie, but it's POV before, so you don't see that he didn't look like Humphrey Bogart from the start. I kind of love magic plastic surgery as a trope in these movies where someone gets plastic surgery and they look completely different. It's silly, but it's really fun. And Lauren Bacall is this woman he meets along the way who ends up helping him. And it's just a great, tense little thriller. I love the experimental way that it's filmed, and I really love the ending too. A lot of noirs have very dark endings, and I'm not telling you how this one goes, but I like it. I think it's really satisfying by the end. Here is my favorite Philip Marlowe movie, Murder, My Sweet. Yes, Bogart and Bacall made another Philip Marlowe movie together, The Big Sleep, but this one's my personal favorite. Philip Marlowe is one of the most classic detectives of this time period. And it's got Dick Powell in the lead role. And this is just a classic murder mystery. Really, really good murder mystery. Nice twists and turns through there. Really fun to watch. A lot of great supporting performances around Dick Powell. And he's just so good as this lead detective. Really, really good movie. I highly recommend that. And I feel like people normally don't put Hitchcock movies into the category of noir. And I understand that. It's almost like Hitchcock movies exist in their own little category. But I did want to recommend one Hitchcock movie, and that is Dial M for Murder. This is just a perfect kind of movie to watch in November. Now, this one is actually in color, and it was actually in 3D when it was released, which is wild because it's based on a play, and most of it is taking place just in one room. But it's another movie with Ray Milland. He's married to Grace Kelly, and she's having an affair with Robert Cummings, and Ray Milland wants to kill her. And the whole movie is about his detailed, intricate plan of how he's going to murder his wife. So it's this in-depth procedural about the process, not a murder mystery, because he says right from the start, yeah, this is my plan. I'm going to kill my wife. And just watching him figure out how he's going to do it and trying to go through with it, is, man, it's fascinating. It's such a great script. This is, I think, one of the more underrated Hitchcock movies, because I'd probably say it's one of my favorite, and it doesn't often get talked about as one of his best, but I just love it, and I think it's a perfect kind of cozy little murder movie to watch this November. So that's my stack, folks, the movies that I recommend for Noirvember. Let me know down in the comments below, what are some noir films that you recommend and that you think that we should all be checking out? Love all the conversations in the comment section that have been going on lately with lots of recommendations. If you missed my last video, check it out. It's on my personal watch list for this month. All of the movies I've never seen that I'm planning to watch, all murder mysteries. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to enjoy yourself today, have some fun, and I will see you next time.